Senator Godswill Akpabio has emerged the president of the 10th Senate after defeating Senator Abdulaziz Yari, while Senator Jibrin Barao emerged as the deputy president after his nomination was the only one put forward by the former governor of Ebonyi State, Dave Umahi. Also, lawmaker representing Zaria constituency of Kaduna, Tajuddin Abbas, has been elected Speaker of the House of Representatives, with Benjamin Kalu from Abia State declared Deputy Speaker. Both chambers were inaugurated with members taking their oath of office shortly after electing their presiding officers. We now turn to Arise analyst Dr. Sam Amadi to provide some perspective on the intrigue leading to the inauguration of the 10th National Assembly and the eventual outcome of the election of presiding officers of both chambers. Good afternoon and welcome to this day. Now, Dr. Sam Amadi, looking at it closely,
good afternoon.
Some will say that they saw this a mile away. Were you in any way surprised about the outcome of both elections for both for the Senate and the House of Representatives?
Well, I think for the Senate, not surprised much. I know that it will be difficult to have an upset. We have the 2015 example, and so maybe many people looked forward to that. And of course, Yari, a strong contender in terms of both prestige. So we have two contenders who are former governors, 2 times governors, who are former chairman of, who are former senators as well. So they carry a lot of gravitas, and they have held position strong in have network and net worth, so to say. And so, and of course, a president who is trying to optimize or maximize legitimacy, political coalition would really find that fight hard, build up all the coalition, make all the calls to ensure that he delivers and don't fall into the trap that President Buhari fell into in 2015, where he was almost absent and the members were attending meetings and Saraki and his colleagues kind of so they stick the carpet off their feet. So I expected that somehow it would be a bruising fight, but Akpabio may most likely emerge, and so not much. But then the House of Reps a little bit surprising. Maybe if you watched what happened in the last 2 weeks before now, it promised to be maybe a big fight with a very slim APC majority, not even enough, not a majority in cumulative sense, because the minority put together had more than the ruling party APC. So if the minorities were determined to kind of secure a bipartisan platform in the House of Reps, we thought maybe they could put their weights together and support maybe Wase, who has cognitive experience, who has been deputy senate president, who seemed to also have good relationship with his members. But again, 3 factors. One, the fact that collective action problem. You know, there's no leader of the opposition who could head everyone together like the former speaker did on behalf of his principal, Tinubu, and the party. So that lack of collective action, you know, affected the strength of the opposition. And again, last-minute horse trading, you know, members, other aspirants pledging, stepping down for Abbas. Abbas, good credential, young person with a PhD, looks generally nice, even though not well known before now. But it's, again, the triumph of party politics and, you know, some level of political concession. Now, it's interesting that even the Labour Party candidates, they started from Abia, you know, which is a southeast state, and up to Enugu and all that. And most of the Labour Party candidates all endorsed the choice of the party. So it tells you a story around the nature of Nigerian politics, that we are still dealing with a political class that is nondescript, the same people get into government through various vehicles and essentially not having any policy or raise strong reasons to diverge from each other. So it's possible with good politics to get all of them to endorse a position that serves their own interests. And so that's what we saw. Everybody seemed to, you know, kind of support, including those who were even championing Wase. And somebody notably said, look, my heart goes to Wase, but my vote goes to Abba. So a real definition of Nigerian politics as of today.
Yeah, there was quite a bunch of unintentional comedy during the voting session this afternoon. Even the G6 members were not able to unseat Tajuddin Abbas in this very interesting story. But how divisive, in your opinion, was this race for the 10th Senate and House speakership? And how much did money play any factor into these?
Well, first, divisive, yes. The earlier days of the campaign was extremely divisive, name-calling, abuse. We watched the videotape of one of the session where the former speaker presided, and the deputy who was until now aspirant to the speakership, fiercely opposing him, back and forth. You can see real bad blood flowing in that session. So there was a lot of acrimony. Those who were opposed to the party were speaking angrily. But it looks like towards the end, as a few days to today, you begin to see people, climb down from their high horses. Maybe the political realism staring in the face. The fact that essentially Nigerian politicians are transaction managers. They are not thinking about principles or some principle difference. So everybody looks at, okay, what happens when we lose? And there's a president who is a strong president in the villa, who probably will not take prisoners, who knows the dark art of politics. I could be undone. I could lose out in the game, and you see everybody line up. So at the beginning it was bitter. But as things move on, pecuniary interest, maybe financial, no financial, allegations on the street about, basically people spending money recklessly to buy their position. And you can say clearly that, look, this illustrates again the fact that we're here to have partisan politics in the real sense, in the positive sense of a party thinking strategically. For example, I expected a PDP and Labour Party to work together and say, look, we need somebody who is not somebody endorsed by the president and his team, because we want to have some degree of independence. But all that calculation has been scrambled by the money politics, by the pecuniary politics, by the politics of seeking position, and basically the two major opposition parties are in tatters. I mean, Labour Party that hasn't got any strength or cohesion to build up a position to head its people together, to provide strategic direction for its reps. I mean, Labour is in tatters, clearly. The only thing left for them is P2B struggling to retrieve his mandate, quote unquote. A PDP in tatters, basically, no leadership. So if you're going to this kind of battle, and APC triumphant, even without the national chairman really doing much, but we see the presidency drawing the party together, the PDP, the APC Governors Forum, Progressive Forum, Hopes of them are working very hard, their senators, everybody working hard. The PDP, nobody's working hard. There's no agenda. So this is like slam dunk. So it's regrettable that we're going to get into a politics again where opposition would be individuals and groups, maybe the obedience that's just nebulous and up in the air, individuals who have reason to fight, but the parties themselves that ought to be opposition have no leadership or focus, and that played out very well. And that's why at the end of the day, it's more like a denouement. It started with bitter, like something going to be conflict, strong fight, we're going to see an upset, and then it tempers out, and then what we have, some kind of coronation, at least at the House of Reps. The different dynamics in the Senate, because of Yari's fighting power, Jose Carlos' extreme bitterness and willingness to move to the last point. That's why that place looked a little bit like a close call. But at the House of Reps, it was done deal, because there's no leadership, no party, no position, no strategic interest. I would have been happy to see the opposition take over the House. And so then it creates some level of bipartisanship, some level of pushback, if assuming we see a repeat of Buhari's administration where the National Assembly feels that they must deliver what the president wants. So for the good of democracy, we need much more pluralism in terms of institutional pluralism, individual pluralism, and of course separation of power in that functional sense.
All right, you mentioned independence, you mentioned pluralism, and that's the fear of several people, especially observers watching from the backbench, that as it stands, the 10th National Assembly might still carry the tag of the 9th National Assembly, which is that they are mere rubber stamp National Assembly members. But for the Senator David Umahi, he says that is not a bad thing, that it helps governance. Some say that's not true. What's your own perspective?
I think David Umahi is notorious for conceiving of governance, democracy as some kind of a kingship. You know, when he was governor, whether he did well in infrastructure, but one thing nobody can take away from him was he was thoroughly authoritarian, didn't understand democracy, didn't even bother to understand that democracy is not about, okay, well, as far as it's concerned, if he was a president, he would want a Senate where he make a call to the Senate president and he rushes there. He says, you know what, I want to borrow 500 trillion. I just feel like, look, I need to build a bridge to nowhere. And David Umahi will say, bring the paper. And then he will tell colleagues, let's do that. And they sign it off. That's his idea of representation. That's why the danger of having that Senate stacked with former governors whose real game is transaction, a sense of entitlement. We are here as custodians of this order that we see now is very corrupt, inefficient, and not delivering anything. This is the order that has made 143 million or more Nigerians multi-dimensionally poor, meaning they don't have access to the most basic things. This order has given about 90-something million Nigerians living in poverty. This order is setting about 20 million Nigerians to be out of school children, and so on and so forth. This order is what is making FOA say, look, we could be one of the major countries who are going to be hit by hunger. And so if you have this situation in the National Assembly that is divergent, that you will see people, the executive will come, before they come to meet you, they are sure of their presentation, rigor. They don't have to have some dinner, executive dinner, in the villa, call you and the speaker, deputy speaker, principal officers, and after drinking and eating, they say, we need this 500 billion. So bring it. You want the National Assembly, that when they say the 5 billion, and they'll ask questions, say, what does the Fiscal Responsibility Act say? What's the cost-benefit analysis as required by the DMO law? These are the kind of things a National Assembly does. But for Governor Umahi, with all respect, now Senator Umahi, it's all about, look, I'm the governor, I'm the president, I mean well for this country. We want to build this country. And after a presidential speech, then the senators line up and shake hands and smile. That is what he thinks the National Assembly is about. So really, I'm not surprised he's saying that. But for anybody who understands democracy and how it should work, knows that we want our senators not to be confrontational and fighting the executive and quarreling and abusing them and doing drama. No, that's not it. And not to be subservient, kissing asses, quote unquote, with third way, interdependent. They help them with legislative framework to govern well. At the same time, they hold them back. The desire of democracy is not based on the goodwill of the leaders. Check and balances. The philosophers who thought about democracy, especially constitutional democracy, understand the basic thing is that human beings are subject to error. Human beings are fallible. In fact, they can be extremely wicked and self-serving. So we don't trust the safety of the Commonwealth in the ethical, this is a good man. The parent means well. We trust it in the institutions that enable a well-meaning president to do well, and that constrains a president who drifts away to serve self-interest or sectional interest. These structures will constrain him and ensure, end of the day, that the Republic does not suffer massive tragedy and somehow survives. Again, Amadi said, made a point, contrasting China and India. India may be a chaotic democracy, but India never suffered a major famine or drought or disaster like China has suffered under Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao, powerful guy, great guy, who had a country under a cultural revolution, and the result was millions of deaths. But in India, with all the chaos of democracy, of the bantering and the deliberations, they avoid those airstrips. So what we're talking about here is not one technocrat, great expert, a visionary, great man who fixes everything. We're talking about institutions that enable a smart guy to govern well, but also constrain a smart guy from taking advantage. This is a country where we see a lot of self-serving, corporate, corruption. People sell refineries or sell discos or sell the bank or sell NNPC to themselves. Who is going to ensure that those sales are due process sales, are not sweetheart deals? Is primarily the legislator. Now, if he has no incentive to investigate, today we're talking about these issues around corruption. People are talking about Nigeria Air. We shouldn't have been dealing with this Monday morning quarterbacking after the game is over. This is what an intense, independent-minded National Assembly would have been tracking day one, so that we won't have this, oh my God, moment. I think that's really those who are saying you need to have that independence. They're not really saying, oh, go there and start fighting the president. They're not saying if the president brings a bill for common good, you should obstructionist. No, that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is that you should conceive yourself as distinct from the executive so that you can second-guess them when they're in error.
You make a good point on explaining the checks and balances, and we also do know that in terms of democracy, that's the key pillar, and it's a bit of a cautionary tale to Rome and the time of Caesar and how all of that played out for those who are interested in history. But I wanted to move on to, still on the topic of checks and balances, the three most powerful seats, as it is now, are occupied by Southerners, particularly CGN, Ariwala in the judiciary. We have President Tinubu as the head of the executive, and now Akpabio as the head of the legislative. Is this going to be a topic of discussion at all? Should this be a worrisome development in terms of checks and balances, or could it be a good thing?
I think it's not worrisome. Consider that the Chief Justice is a meritocratic or hierarchical position. So at the time we had several back-to-back Northerners occupying it, not by imposition, but the fact that they're the most senior. We follow the seniority part. In the other U.S., for example, the president appoints. Anybody could be appointed. So they're not opponents of Tinubu. So we'll exclude that and say Supreme Court is okay out of politics. Now, with the presidency having South and North as president and vice, and now having a Southerner, it would have been ideal to have a Northern Senate president and have a Southern deputy to balance the fact that the real executive power is in the president and not in the president and the vice. The Section 5 is very clear. The executive power of the Federation is in the president, who has three roles. In constitutional law, we talk about chief executive. He is the sole organ that deals with foreign policy, and he is the commander-in-chief. And the Constitution says he can do some of this job through his vice, through his ministers, or through any other person. So it's very clear that the biggest job in this land is the president. And so the notion of a vice president is actually a support. No real constitutional personality, apart from being running for the office. Again, the head of the National Assembly, and the way the National Assembly is fashioned is different from the way it's done in the U.S., for example. The Senate President has so much power, is the chairman of the National Assembly, the National Assembly as an institution, as the Senate President. Again, a big office, and it goes to the South. So, but the problem is that APC ran into a big problem. If President Tinubu, as then candidate Tinubu, had chosen a Christian North, as it was being advocated, it would have been no difficulty throwing this Senate President to the North, because it would have been more balanced with the Northern president, maybe, and a Southwest Muslim president, a North Central or a North anywhere Christian vice president, a Northern Muslim Senate president, and a Southern Christian deputy. More balanced. But as it is now, I think it will be less issue. Let's see how the president packs his team in terms of core cabinet offices, also principal officers, the chief whip, and the others in the National Assembly. So the government might find a way to dilute what may look like Southern lopsidedness by how they also manage the entire government. Again, nothing in the dimension of what you saw under Buhari. This is so far, this government has not overstepped. We have a president and a vice from the south, from the north, and we have a chief of staff from the south, and we have a senator government from the north. The only thing we are seeing is that the real powerhouse, which is the villa, is now having president Muslim, vice Muslim, chief of staff, which in my view, in the American theory of presidential governance, is the real authority outside the president, outside the vice president, and in the U.S. case, outside the Secretary of State, which is the U.S. runs focus on foreign policy. Nigeria is weak. Nigeria is like a dwarf in foreign policy. So the foreign secretary of the foreign minister is not that big. So the chief of staff, big job. So the region's problem will be more than the regional problem. It's fairly balanced, and I think we should move from there. But keep an eye on how we staff the main ministries, finance, attorney general, maybe petroleum, and the other bigger offices. And of course, the big parastatals, central bank, the custom, FCT Abuja, these are areas that the president can use to dilute any concentration, whether it's in religion or in ethnicity.
All right, Dr. Sam Amadi, I would like to hear from you. A lot of people have complained that increasingly, as with each assembly being gathered for each tenure, the senators or the National Assembly generally is becoming more detached and farther away from the people. What's your advice to senators, House of Rep members, on how to bridge that gap? Because they are supposed to be very close to the grassroots, but no thanks to politics. We've seen the fact that senators and House of Rep members are very far away from their constituencies.
I think that's a big problem, and it could be perhaps managed through some kind of soft law. For example, this National Assembly could even make a law that maybe call it constituency management and representation law that requires each legislator, the offices they must set in their constituency, how many times they must have public sessions with the legislator, what are the basic levels of staffing they need there. You know, instead of bringing people to Abuja, you have staff there, letters for their constituency are read. So there may be a self-regulation by the National Assembly itself to try to manage what the members do with their constituency. The heart of democracy as representation is that these honorable members and senators are able to represent the people well. And that means very significant presence. That means clear channels of communication on issues, and even requirement for them to go back and seek opinion of their members before major national issues. For example, during the third-term debate, I was special advisor to Ken Namani. And at the point, apart from saying, look, media, that was the beginning of media televising live coverage of proceeding. It was done as a way of creating transparency and accountability. At the same time, the Senate President said, look, before we do the votes, all of you go back to your constituencies, go and consult them. Then when you come here, you're going to tell us what your constituencies wanted to do. I mean, we can monitor who went and what the rigor of those consultations. But the fact that they were asked to go back to their constituencies, to go and talk to their constituencies, was a way of reminding them that actually what they needed to do at that very important moment of history was to hear from their people and convey that representation, what people want in this big debate of whether to approve third term or not for the president. Again, if you look at the theory of representation, we have two theories. One is the theory of legislators as trustees. The other is as agents, not as trustees. What that theory, pushed by Edmund Burke, one of the greatest parliamentarians, is that, look, they are there to use their best knowledge to serve the people. The theory of agents says they are there to do what their people want them to do. So any of the ways, whether you're an agent doing what exactly they say do, vote for A, or a trustee using your best sense to say this is what is best for my people, you need to be in touch regularly with the people. So I think we might have the National Assembly make a rule, self-regulation, that says all members in a year must do X, Y, Z. This is the report. When after each hearing, you give us a report, submit a report to the clerk of the proceedings, show us the people you hire to stay in your local office, show us either quarterly the meetings you hold with them and what they say. Also, show us a channel for letter writing, that these letters are responded to. And I think, again, civil society should get involved in this as well, because, you see, democracy deficit is increasing in Nigeria. And what that simply means is that, look, we do election. After election, there are no more consultations, participation, till the next election. So each election, we've just got these guys in now. How do we ensure that these guys are actually in touch with their people? We can't do that except to create a structure, an incentive process. The recall mechanism has to be made much more actionable. I mean, so many people ought to have been recalled, but look, the process, the corruption, the opacity around that process may make it difficult for people to recall their leader. I think a recall process and use of referendum for very important national issues are one of those important ways that developed democracies have developed to cure what we refer as democracy deficit, where democratic structures and processes themselves become undemocratic because of the way technocrats, leaders, take away the process from consulting with the people. So they speak in the name of the people, but they don't hear the people. They don't try to touch base with the people, but they are here as representative. Today, people say, my name is Sam Amadi, representing the good people of I and the good people of so and so, vote for Mr. A. But then you have to try in a way to listen to what are the good people of XYZ actually thinking about this issue. How do I mirror their concern? How do I engage them and explain to them that this is what I think is the best for the country and this is what I think I should take to Abuja? And they'll tell you, we don't agree with you, we think you should consider taking X to Abuja instead of Y. So these are structural issues that ultimately weaken accountability and make democracy become, incapable of delivering development or even freedom. So I will support, first, self-regulation by the National Assembly to create processes to achieve this. And if not, we try to make a law that provides certain benchmarks. This is what every legislator, for example, you have to sit in the session up to so in a year to have passed the mark. How many times I will look at many of the legislators don't even attend session. I remember a House of Reps member who was a full-time student at Harvard University when I was there. He was an LLM student, serving a House of Reps member from Imo State. And he stayed there throughout, passed his LLM, came back to Nigeria, but was also, how is he representing his people, right, sitting in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and being a student? Right.
Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, it's always great having you on the show. Thank you so much for all your insight on the topic.